I didn't say a word when the HOA president called the sheriff on me for blocking community access. I just stood there at the edge of the bridge, the only bridge leading into the subdivision, and quietly handed the deputy a folded document. It was a county easement deed, recorded in my grandfather's name back in 1974. The sheriff unfolded it, scanned the seal, then turned to the HOA president and said, "Ma'am, he's not blocking your access. You're trespassing on his property." I watched her face drain of color. I didn't smile. I just said, "Next time, ask before you pave over someone's bridge." I hadn't planned on any of this. 2 years earlier, I was just looking for somewhere quiet to retire a piece of land with some water, some trees, maybe enough space to restore the old cabin my grandfather built before I was born. When I found the property, it was perfect. A few acres of woods, a creek running through the center, and a narrow, hand-built bridge that connected the county road to the driveway. I didn't think much of the subdivision being built up around it. The developer told me they deformed a homeowners association to keep things organized and beautiful. I wasn't really interested in joining anything, but he said my lot wasn't part of it anyway. "You're grandfathered out," he said with a laugh. That phrase would become more meaningful later than either of us realized. For the first year, life was peaceful. I spent my mornings fishing by the creek and my afternoons working on the cabin roof. The bridge groaned a little under the truck's weight, but it held strong, just like everything my grandfather built. The neighbors were friendly enough at first. They'd wave, ask about the old bridge, sometimes even bring coffee over. While I worked on the porch, I didn't know it then, but as soon as the HOA board turned over, friendliness turned into surveillance. The first notice came in spring, a bright yellow paper taped to my gate read, "Notice of violation unauthorized modifications to community access structure." I stood there, confused. The community access structure, as they called it, was my bridge, the same bridge that had been there since the 70s. They claimed I had obstructed shared property by placing reflective posts on it for nighttime safety. They fined me $150. I thought it was some clerical error. I called the HOA office, but the woman on the phone said flatly, "All residents must comply with HOA regulations." I told her I wasn't a resident under the HOA. She just repeated, "Sir, your own community property." That was the first time I felt the quiet chill of being targeted. Over the next few weeks, more letters came, fines for landscaping inconsistencies, threats for refusing to grant access for inspection. They even sent a crew to reap the lines on my bridge, claiming it was part of neighborhood safety improvements. I had to physically block them from rolling tar onto the planks. They threatened to escalate legally. I told them, politely, "You're welcome to." At first, I tried being civil. I sent certified letters explaining that my parcel was not under the HOA's jurisdiction. I attached copies of my deed and the original survey showing the property line ran past the creek, meaning the bridge was entirely mine. No response. Instead, I started getting notices of pending liens. It was absurd. They had no authority, but they were counting on me not knowing that. They wanted to scare me into compliance or sell. That's when I stopped arguing and started reading. I spent nights combing through county records, tracing every plat and zoning document back 50 years. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. The subdivision. Every single house across the creek was technically accessible only by that one bridge. When the developer built the neighborhood, he had never purchased or leased the bridge or the few feet of land it sat on. He'd just assumed it belonged to the county. But according to the 1974 deed, that strip of land and the bridge were privately owned by my grandfather. And when my father passed, they became mine. In other words, the only legal way in or out of the subdivision ran across my property. I didn't plan to use that as leverage. Not at first. But when the HOA sent a final notice threatening to pursue foreclosure for unpaid fines, I realized civility was pointless. I contacted a property attorney, showed him the documents, and within a week, he helped me file an easement control notice with the county. It legally recognized my ownership of the bridge and re-registered it under a private use agreement. That meant anyone using the bridge, including the entire HOA, needed my permission. The next day, I put up a small, discreet sign, "Private access, authorized vehicles only." 2 days later, chaos. The HOA president came storming up, red-faced, yelling about illegal obstruction and community safety. I didn't yell back. I just told her, "The bridge is private property. You're welcome to apply for an easement agreement." She threatened to call the sheriff. I said, "Please do." That's the moment I mentioned at the beginning. The sheriff reading that old deed, looking at her, and saying I was in the right. After that incident, I knew things were about to get ugly. The HOA called an emergency board meeting and tried to rally the neighborhood against me. Flyers went around claiming I was blocking emergency services. I expected that, so before they could act, I quietly contacted the County Road Commission and the fire department. Both confirmed that the HOAS road was listed as private, not county maintained. That meant emergency services weren't legally obligated to use it, unless an access agreement existed, which conveniently now ran through me. When the HOA realized that, te offeretu by the bridge for a laughably low price, I declined. Instead, I drafted a use contract, a simple annual maintenance fee per household for bridge upkeep and liability coverage. It wasn't much less than they paid in HOA dues, but it shifted the power dynamic completely. Suddenly, the people who'd been finding me were knocking on my door asking for signatures. A few refused out of pride. That's when the county zoning board stepped in. Turns out, without legal access to a public road, their properties technically violated subdivision code. Mortgages, insurance, all of it hung on that bridge. The county sent a letter reminding the HOA that they needed a valid access easement or face compliance penalties. My lawyer helped me formalize it. Within 2 months, the HOA president resigned. The fines against me were quietly dismissed. The board dissolved entirely by the end of the year. Now, the bridge still stands. I keep it maintained, same as my grandfather did. Sturdy, honest work. The neighbors drive over it every day, and they always slow down when they see me out by the water. Some wave, some don't. Either way, it's quiet again. No notices, no threats. Just the sound of the creek running under the boards, and the occasional thought that sometimes the best revenge is shouting or suing it, as simply knowing the ground you stand on is yours, and no one can take it from you.